Hello, I'm the Observer, and welcome to an episode where we play Minecraft while talking about topics. Today, I am here with DC, the President of the United States of America.
Yo.
And we're also here with the Wandering Trader for some reason. I don't know why. Today's topic will be talking about the good old world of Peter Pan. Now, for this video, we're going to be mostly talking about Disney's Peter Pan, mainly because that's the subject we're most experienced with, because we don't really know that much about any other version of Peter Pan other than the Hook version. So,
The first one?
yeah, the first one. Overall, I'd say it's like a pretty decent movie, I'd say.
Yeah. Oh gosh, no. Sorry,
What happened?
Decent movie. Sorry, I was fighting zombies. Okay, continue.
Okay, my goodness. Anyways, so the way that Peter Pan works, or like the world of Peter Pan works, is just kind of like the embodiment of childhood fun, I'd say. Everybody's a bit childish, plays games with each other, which is kind of a neat element about Peter Pan overall.
It's a lot of fun. It's you got this little motley crew of kids who are all kind of just like, you know, like there's the one part where they're talking about, and we can talk about like all the sort of cultural you know, especially with that movie, the sort of the cultural stereotypes and all that, but like they're talking about like the Native Americans are talking about like, oh yeah, you know, like we capture them and like take them captive one day, and then they take us captive one day. Like it's all in like,
it's a world where nobody really ever grows up. Even like characters like, say, the Tinkerbell or like the mermaids, for instance, they're kind of like immature in the sense that they are just kind of girls who just kind of they're just kind of girls who are always jealous all the time when, and like the cool guy hangs out with another girl, kind of like that, you know. You know.
And this wolf decided not to. Yeah, they definitely have that that air of immaturity about them, and really it's interesting because I've actually read the I don't know if it's original, but it was one of the original books. I don't know if it came out as play first or a book. I'm trying to figure out the origins of Peter Pan, but it was definitely one of the earlier versions of Peter Pan. And the way it was written, it almost shows Peter Pan and Wendy and like Michael and all those guys to be kind of really selfish. So it's showing the joys of childhood, but it's also showing like, hey, like, because, you know, in the movie, like, we just assume like the parents were out at the party, there's time difference, like they never knew they were gone kind of deal. In the book, like, they know they're gone. They're gone for like weeks and months, and like their parents are like terrified.
Wow.
Like they are so scared, and like, but when the kids come back, they're like, oh hey, we're back, like why didn't you greet us when we came back? You were asleep. And like it doesn't process with them that like, hey, your parents were really scared for you, like, and the line, there's even a line of things that's like, but they were children and they only cared about themselves. And so it was really interesting because it kind of gave a more realistic, like even in the movie, you know, Wendy's whole thing where she's like, hey, we have to go back and grow up.
Let's talk about good old Peter for a second, shall we? Because I think
that, he's an interesting character.
Yeah, he's kind of like he is described as something as the embodiment of childhood joy, I'd say.
Yeah, I feel like I definitely interpret him differently as a kid than an adult.
Yeah.
I know. What do you think? What do you
I think he's just kind of like supposed to be more of the embodiment of childhood. Like a lot of people say, like they group like a lot of like Disney characters into like a group of like, wow, these are bad role models for kids, and Peter Pan usually gets grouped into that, when I'm just here saying Peter Pan isn't supposed to be a role model for kids. He's supposed to be an embodiment of childhood, not an example of childhood.
Yeah, and that's a really good distinction to pull, because you know, like because really the role model in this entire story is kind of Wendy.
She's the one who in the story realizes that, you know, childhood is kind of nice and stuff, but sometimes you need to grow up. That's kind of
Yeah,
like the story of it.
Yeah, because Peter's not the one who goes through the arc. Wendy and the boys goes through the arc, because Wendy at the beginning of the movie is like, her dad's like, hey, you need to move out of the room. Like, it's time for you to grow up a bit, and she doesn't want to do that. And so by the end of the movie, she's realizing, hey, I'm ready to do this. She's the one who goes through the character arc. And so you're right when you say it's Peter Pan's not meant to be the role model.
Yeah.
He's meant to be this sort of like otherworldly figure, and you can tell that he is because, you know, all the other characters are telling stories about him. I was kind of sad, like, after I read the original, like, or whatever book I read, I also read a spin-off of How Neverland Was Made, and that was okay. But the book that I read, like, the dad and mom are, like, way more interesting as characters.
I'm willing to hear how they were in the book, just to know for comparison's sake.
Well, like, because they're really funny in the book. So, like, George in the book, like, when they first have Wendy, he's like, and so they sat there and calculated it out, and taking into account, like, the coffee and the groceries and all these things, they decided that, Mr. Darling decided that they couldn't indeed afford to keep Wendy, which Mrs. Darling was quite grateful for. Like, it was just funny.
Yeah.
It was just like, you have this man who's very, like, he loves his family, and he's like, but he's also very much a calculator, and like, how much is this going to cost? Are we going to make sure, like, it's just, he's a lot more
practical to, like, drive home the points of, like, childhood versus, like, adulthood in the sense, right?
Yeah.
I think now we can, like, move on to, like, a different character that's important to the movie.
Right, let's go.
Tinkerbell. Let's talk about. Let's talk. Like, the thing is, it's quite interesting because when you think about, like, mascots, like, for Disney, you would think that they would be, like, all kind of, like, brand safety and stuff, and they all, like, fit, like, within, like, Disney's guidelines. However, Tinkerbell isn't that at all. Like, she's, like, a very prominent mascot for, like, Disney, but she kind of suffers, like, the same thing as, like, Mickey to an extent, where, because of how much she's paraded around as, like, the mascot for Disney, I think they kind of forgot what her origin was supposed to be. But unlike Mickey, who, when you see Mickey Mouse, he started off as more of a trickster kind of character, but when he kind of, like, morphed into more of the, aha, mascot's cool, haha. While Tinkerbell, the generic fairy type of character, but when you actually go back and look at it, at Peter Pan, she's murderous. Like, my goodness.
Yeah, and I think part of that, too, is because, you know, because Disney's a brand, and so they kind of ran with Tinkerbell, and they did all the movies and stuff like that, and so...
Yeah, but the thing is...
pushed her out a little bit, but...
Yeah, it's kind of, like, fascinating how, like, out of all the characters they could have chose for a mascot, they chose Tinkerbell out of all of them, because I will say that Tinkerbell has, like, some of the most personality out of, like, any female character you could have find back in, like, the good old classic days of Disney, outside of, like, say the villains, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, actually, that is something I think Peter Pan does well, too, because if you think about it, out of all the female protagonists around that time, Wendy also has a lot of personality, and she actually, like, she makes solid decisions. Like, she's like, hey, like, these mermaids are hurting me, tell them to stop, and Peter Pan's laughing, and she's not happy about that. She's like mad at Peter when he doesn't stand up for her. She's like, hey, no, we gotta go, and Peter's like, no way, and she's like, yeah way. Like, for a female character, at least of that time, especially when you consider, like, Aurora and Sleeping Beauty and, like, different things like that, like, it's interesting because all the she actually has a lot of she's a very fleshed out character, you know? And that's sort of thing. She is the main character, kind of.
Tinkerbell is kind of like the thing is, I think the thing with Peter Pan, and it's like, I wouldn't say that Wendy is, like, the protagonist of Peter Pan, because she's more of just kind of like a part of the ride, along along with John and Michael. She just happens to have, like, disagreements. Tinkerbell, however, kind of drives the plot along, where she tries to attempt to kill Wendy in, like, the first time they get to Neverland, and then after that, she then goes to Captain Hook Hook to make. No, she doesn't go with Captain Hook. Captain Hook like kidnaps her to like make a deal with Tinkerbell, and then Tinkerbell's like because she's kind of just wrapped in like jealousy or something. She just kind of like goes along with it, like sells out Peter only for Hook to just like double cross her. It's kind of interesting to like think about like that, because I think with Tinkerbell there are like three versions of the character.
Yeah, well, if you take the Pixie Hollow version, like, she somewhere along the way became a lot more psychotic. Like, I'm not sure what happened there, but she is actively malicious in the Peter Pan movies. I don't know, I would argue that that even between gosh. Like, even between movies, like Tinkerbell certainly does get less malicious between the two movies. Even
we can talk about like say Captain Hook now, and I have to say, Scott, Captain Hook is kind of like a great balancing kind of character. Like he can be dangerous when he wants to, but he can also be like a goofball when he also wants to. Oh, this is what you've been making then. You've been making a house.
When I've been laying the floor down. But yeah.
Anyways, I gotta go find more iron.
Alright, go for it.
Anyways.
Yeah, Captain Hook is a really, really good villain.
Yeah, like in most of his appearances, like even in like the Pixie Hollow and the Neverland sequel, he's always portrayed as a smart little like always holding the cards to himself kind of thing, and can always being a manipulator. I always kind of like that about Hook.
Yeah, they did a really good job with his keeping his characterization consistent and keeping it as a perfect not quite a foil to Peter Pan, but because they both have that tricksy, crafty kind of slyness, but he's almost like what Peter Pan could become.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I saw this I saw this one song. It was I don't know if you know what Vocaloids are, but they're fun. But it was about like a spoof, not really a spoof. It was like based on Peter Pan, and in the song like, Peter Pan this boy who's Peter Pan gets picked by the fairy, and so he goes to Neverland. He's having so much fun with everybody, and he fights Captain Hook to the death, and he wins, and then he realizes he gets super bored. And so, to stave off boredom, he becomes the next Captain Hook, and then the fairy goes and picks another Peter Pan, and the cycle keeps going. And it was like, that's kind of what Captain Hook is. Because
he's kind of just as immature as, say, Peter, or in, like, his vengeance and stuff. Like, all of his crew says, "Can we go home, sir? We just want to go home." And he's like, "No, I need to have Peter Pan's head for this."
Yeah.
Anyways.
And so, in a way, you're almost seeing both the childishness of youth and then the potential childishness of adulthood.
Yeah.
You know, you're playing on both those. It's really fun when you have a story where both the heroes and the villains just work off so well from one another.
Hook's introduction scene is kind of like a great introduction because he kills a guy in the scene, but yet he still gets played off comedically. It's just like a very good scene.
Yep. And doesn't he kill the guy because the guy starts singing about how he always loses or something like that? Like, it's something heady like that.
Yeah, something like that. Or it's just like a song about, like, pirates or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyways. I think now What?
We gotta talk about Smee. If we're gonna talk about Hook, we gotta talk about Smee.
Smee's cool. He's nice.
It's funny because Smee is such a bumbling character, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like he's actually, and the fact that he's actually the reason for, like he's Hook's reason, almost in a way. It kind of, I think it's kind of interesting. It kind of shows that sometimes like Hook in many ways is a lot smarter than Smee.
Yeah.
But it almost is not in the ways that matter.
Like he's not emotionally smart. He's kind of like in the way Hook is smart in the way that he's like intelligent. But when you actually like goes down to emotional. All smarts as me always like calms him down and trying to like when it comes to like the crocodiles and stuff. So I guess now that we've said like kind of like the interesting stuff about the movie, I think I now have to go into a bit of like the thing is like I will say that Peter Pan is like a very like fun little movie, but it is kind of a movie of its time. It's a great movie for its time, but because the thing is, a lot of like when you look at like a lot of classic Disney movies, they're not really stories in a sense. They're kind of more just like flexes of animation than they are trying to tell actual stories for the most part. When you go back to like a lot of Disney stories, they were like a lot of them were just basically this thing happened and this thing happened, and Peter Pan and kind of has that to like a very good extent. For instance, like the whole subplot with like the Native Americans, I'd say, is kind of like an extension of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd push back a little bit on that because of the because the Disney princess fairy tales were definitely like that. Like it was a lot more about the ambiance or like Bambi.
Yeah.
You know, like it's a lot more about animation and the music and that was beautiful for its time. You know, that was really artistic. I think though Peter Pan is based a little bit more on a movie because I know the whole section with the Native American representations, like it feels a little out of place, but it actually is kind of integral to Wendy's character arc.
Yeah.
Because that's when Wendy gets mad at Peter, and that's when she decides, hey, like, I don't want this anymore. And so it actually becomes an integral part of the movie because, one, they're returning Tiger Lily, which was how Hook wanted to lure out. So that's like a plot-driven thing. But then it's also character-driven because this is when Wendy's kind of like, maybe this isn't all it's cracked up to be kind of deal. Maybe this isn't what I want. And that's kind of that's why it differs from Alice in Wonderland. Like if you watch Alice in Wonderland, it's just these random little segments, and this is like the story too, so it's less about Disney and more about the original story. But with Peter Pan, it's like each of the little stories either is plot driven or it is character driven. Like I can't think of any of the
oh
gosh.
Then why is there a witch?
What are you?
Why is there a witch? Burn the witch!
Burn the witch!
Burn the witch! Okay, we burned the witch.
Yeah.
I didn't get any of the Aryan back. That's unfortunate. Anyways, I'm saying that it's like the thing is, I think that Alice in Wonderland and works is kind of like the better ones of like the classic Disney age because the whole like nonsense, the nonsense is kind of the point of the plot. Whereas in Peter Pan, well, there is a story. I will say there is a story. I think the story takes a backseat to just the adventures of Neverland. Wendy does have a character arc, but it's not as like say pronounced as you could say like modern like Disney one. So it's kind of like much harder to get invested into the story that way. That's what I'm basically trying to say. It's kind of like a good like theme park kind of thing. Like you go to it and you're here to see what Neverland is, and you go out saying that was like a good ride for the most part. I'd say it's like it's not something you like have like. It's like Neverland isn't something you go into like having like a good expecting to have like a big like grand kind of story. It's just that if you're looking for that, then this is kind of not really that kind of tale. Because I will say one other issue I kind of like take with the movie is kind of like a bit and how like the plot just kind of like happens with Captain Hook and Smee just kind of like hear about like Tinkerbell being jealous, and they're kind of like, oh, we could just like use her, and it's like one who told them about like Tinkerbell being jealous, but that's kind of like I guess that.
Remember the spy.
One of the Lost Boys is a spy, I guess. But
dude, that would be so fun.
Yeah, it would be funny if like one of those Lost Boys, like the skunk, is actually a spy for like.
Skunk is a spy. Yeah, well, and you know in the original, like at least in the book that I read, one of the original ones, like all the Lost Boys still grew up, and so Peter would try to kill them when they tried to grow up, and so all of Hook's crew was meant to be all the Lost Boys that grew up that didn't get killed by Peter.
Oh, yeah, that's grim.
I think too, like, I think we don't necessarily appreciate this as much in modern media, but they definitely did have a big appreciation for having, being more subtle in their both in their storytelling and in their animation. And I personally like that. I know not everyone does, but definitely in those times, like, you know, like Wendy's character arc is more subdued. Like, you don't necessarily like, oh, like she says, oh, I have this big revelation. It kind of just flows naturally out of the events of the story. And so I definitely agree. It is definitely more of its time, but also I think it depends on what kind of person, what kind of stories you like. Because I know I like more subtle stories, and it seems like you have a different taste than
it's just kind of like more of the way you kind of like invest in a story, because I'd say for me that Peter Pan that like it does have that, but it's just kind of like one that's not really pronounced per se.
Yeah, it definitely
I
is
just
Do
you want to talk about the Native Americans?
Yeah, that's good. Let's discuss those first. First off, I'm curious to know, what are your thoughts on especially when we're in an now talking about you know, how we portray people, and especially people groups, and playing on stereotypes. And so what are your thoughts? I'm curious to know first.
So when I was first rewatching the movie for like this video, I was like, this is kind of like bad, but it's not as bad as you would think. And then they started doing sign language. That's just kind of like very of its time. Not from like a story perspective, but more of like how people were portrayed kind of back then, especially kind of like Native Americans. But I am kind of like surprised that in like the trailer for the live action version, they did bring back the Native Americans, which is interesting. Which I will say,
did?
Yeah, they brought them back. So yeah,
okay, we're gonna see how that goes.
With a thing like a remake, you get to like relearn from like your mistakes. I'd say you get to like improve on like stuff that wasn't working in the movie, or you could like improve on like mistakes you've made. I think that this remake will do it. Oh, I'm just gonna say this right now. Peter Pan Return to Neverland is better than the original movie. I'm just gonna say that from like an actual narrative perspective, and from like kind of a thing of like, does this work or does this not? I think this is better than the original movie. So let me get.
Did you know I had a crush on Peter, like this Peter, for a while? Like, it was my first animated crush. This
funny.
Oh yeah, I thought he was like, because he wasn't as creepy. The first one was so creepy.
Let me get at some of like the flaws of this movie out of the way first. There is a bit of like, say, contrivance with the movie. Let's say like the pirates suddenly learning how to teleport out of nowhere. And there are some other flaws, like it's in the period of Disney where they didn't have characters sing the songs. They just have like play a song over the montage, where I think it would have been better if like, say, like Jane were to sing some of the songs.
Well, they did sing some. Like they
sang, they sang like the Lost Boys song they sang, but for the most part, very like post-Renaissance era of music. And I do have like one other flaw, which is just big Jane, where I'm like, she should have blew the whistle herself, but that's just kind of like a thing where I think that would have been better for her arc. But overall,
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but apart from that, I think this is like a really good movie. A lot of Disney direct-to-DVD sequels, or just like Disney sequels in general, they tend to like just don't really do anything to like either like improve the original, because it's kind of like the original already like set at like a very high standard, so it's very hard to do that on like a lower budget. It's kind of like with Peter Pan and like Return to Neverland, it's kind of like what happens if they took the original. It's kind of like a case study of what happens if you took like a classic like Disney film and remade it with modern standards, I think. And with like
Yeah.
how they remade it back then.
Yeah. Both
Yeah.
definitely yeah, both
Yeah.
like I would say I personally really liked the second one a lot better than the
Yeah.
first one, but I
I
think the
also
second one
agree.
couldn't exist. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I think the second one couldn't exist without the first one. Like the first one
Yeah.
needed to happen
Yeah.
because the stories are like they're
Yeah, and they're
mirroring
kind
one
of
another.
yeah. The thing is, when you look at this plot, it's like wait, isn't this just the first movie? And yes, it does have elements of the first movie, but it's not exactly like the first movie. The first movie was about how Wendy is a child who doesn't want to grow up learning that yeah, I should probably grow up. This movie is more of her daughter Jane, learn who is grown up because of the war and stuff and doesn't really believe in childish things anymore, who learns throughout the course of the movie how to like why childhood is kind of like a blessing. I think this story works better for like the characters of like say Peter Pan, Tinkerbell, and that kind of stuff because the thing is in the original movie, story kind of requires the to like see that they were wrong in what they did. Like in Peter Pan, he was kind of like I had a whole like thing. It's like, fine, you guys leave. I see if I care. But the thing is, he never really apologizes for that. He's just like, all right, guys, let's go home. Like a story perspective, it just doesn't it really flow as well as it should because the story they're telling and kind of like requires like him to like try to apologize. Here though, it's kind of like Peter Pan trying to show Jane what life is how life can be. It's kind of like just kind of like the benefits of like Peter Pan going to be of childhood and stuff to Jane who's kind of lived in the war and trying to grow up as fast as she can because she wants to look over like her family and stuff.
Alright, observer, I don't know if you knew this, but certain persons whom we both know, they really did not like Jane.
Really?
I thought she was really bratty. Yeah, they really didn't like her, which fair.
The thing is, I think Jane is a much better character than Wendy in a way because yeah, I will say that I think her arc is a lot more like pronounced than Wendy's is because as I said before, Wendy's isn't really that focused in on not to discredit Wendy or anything. I just think like Jane does like her arc a lot better than Wendy's, I'd say. Because I think Jane is also like a really great character in terms of like I think if we made like a tier list of like Disney sequel characters, I think like Jane would be like very like at the top of the list, I'd say.
She'd be high up. Though I would actually again, I think this is also a preference in like like story things because I favor Wendy a little bit
Fair enough.
over Jane because I think Wendy I think it was like what you were saying about Jane. Remember what you were saying? How she doesn't actually she doesn't blow the whistle.
Yeah.
In almost a way, her character arc isn't actually realized because
I
never thought about it, but you're absolutely right. Her character arc isn't fully realized because he doesn't actively make that choice. Whereas Wendy does actually make the choice. Hey, we're leaving. And she she straight up walks out of there, and she's like, I am gonna grow up. Whereas you know she. And to be fair, Jane does what do you call it? Like she does she makes sure like I want to be a kid for a while and to let it go and so in that case her arc is realized, but she doesn't she gets the moral guilt of her actions with though Tinkerbell I guess she does do she does that she has to
I do think that's kind of like the one problem I have with Jane. Other than that, I think she's a great character overall.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I do think she's a good character. I think it's rare when you have I can watch both the original Peter Pan and the second movie and still get both stuff out of it. It's different stuff.
Yeah, it's different. It's the thing is with something say The Little Mermaid 2 seems like a different scenario, but when you actually think about it, it's No, this is the exact same story you told in the original, where this is a very similar story that was told in the original.
Yeah.
It's just an inversion of the story, I'd
Yeah,
say.
it's not
It's
building
too,
like Peter Pan
yeah,
2 is. Peter Pan 2 is building upon the foundation already laid out in 1 because,
yeah,
like, it's a fundamentally different problem that Jane has, but it is very much related to Wendy's problem in the first one.
yeah.
They
It's
they
very
work well off each other.
another thing I quite like about this movie is how it kind of like it takes like the characters from like the first movie, and I think it does them pretty well in this movie as
It
well. Like
does,
Hook,
it so does.
Peter, and Tinkerbell are like still the same characters. They are
Yeah.
in like the first movie. They're a lot more to say that they're consistent with the characters from the first movie. I look at them and I'm
Yeah,
like,
they
oh
don't,
yeah, they're
like, go through these massive shifts and, like, that's not the character anymore. Like, you can
yeah,
still see, like, Wendy is still telling stories, Peter is still mischievous and, like,
yeah.
throwing Jane off cliff. Tinkerbell is still trying to.
And Hook is still kind of like like
Yeah, Hook is
scheming.
still smart and
Yeah,
scheming. Smee is still the same too. I will
yeah,
say the octopus was a little bit of a weird choice. We
yeah.
didn't
No,
talk about
I
the
do think it's
crocodile.
like I think they imply that either like they got rid of like the either oh dang it come on
Sweet.
I can't because there's a skeleton right here and he's just trying to like to kill
Slay the
us.
skeleton.
I'm trying to.
Slay.
Oh my goodness, there's a pillager.
What the heck? Villager! Why did we choose a lower ground for our thing?
This was a choice we made. It was not the best choice. I will
This is the choice
say
you made. This is why we're making
I will
out.
say it was. They did imply that it's like, oh, I got rid of that stinking crocodile, but now I have to deal with like an octopus now. Why are there so many witches in this? Like,
Why are there witches? Is there a swamp nearby?
no, there is not. What the heck? Oh
I'm
no.
gonna die, dude. I'm
Okay.
doomed. I'm gonna
Okay.
die. This is getting bad.
I'm
Here, I'm
leaving.
coming right into the sunlight. Ha! Try me, fool! Come
Yeah.
at me.
Yeah. I will say I do think from like a bit more. I kind of like how he was introduced. The crocodile just kind of showed up out of nowhere, but here it's kind of like they were going to feed like Jane to like the monster under the sea. It just so happened
That's
that
fair.
they
That's fair.
accidentally he lands on Hook and he's like, oh yeah, that's actually quite tasty. You know, he's actually tasty.
Yeah.
I will say
Like
that.
a catfish,
I think he
really.
has a better introduction than the crocodile, though I do think
That's
his
fair. Definitely is
inclusion.
menacing.
I do think his inclusion is kind of just like the crocodile again, although with this he had a lot more stuff to like animate with. I will also say that I do like the Lost Boys a bit better in this one. I think they're a lot more
Yeah.
funnier and they do have a lot more of a point, I'd say.
Yeah. I think you can also see, like, it's fun to see them interact with one another. I don't feel like we saw them
Yeah.
interact with one another a whole bunch in the first one, and then this
Yeah.
one, because it was really more about Michael and John, but in this
Yeah.
one you can kind of see, like, oh, hey, like, they have, like, the way they do this thing, or how they, like, Toots is, like, kind of the baby, and, like, the twins, and, like, they have a lot more fun with one another. They feel more like, kids interacting with one another, you know what I mean?
Return to Neverland is kind of like a movie you don't really hear about that much when it comes to like Disney like sequel territory, mainly because well it usually a lot of the discussion comes down to direct to DVD sequels, and Peter Pan Return to Neverland it went like directly to theaters. I'd say that Neverland is a lot more alive here than it was in the original. Like there's a lot more animals around you. Like when the pirates go into Neverland, it's like this weird like trip, like this weird like trippy sequence of like going into like voice clips of the original movie. I'd say that like Return to Neverland is still like one of like the best Disney sequels.
And honestly, just one of the better Peter Pan adaptations, because there's a ton of Peter Pan adaptations, but the sequel is just it kind of still captures the essence of Peter Pan while telling a new story, honestly. And okay, we got to talk about my favorite scene of that entire movie, which is Peter Pan and Wendy's reuniting.
Yeah, that was a great scene. Like it's kind of like a good scene where it's kind of like wow, you grew up, Wendy, and it's like yeah, I did. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's not like in a like sad way of like she forgot everything. Like she was still She was an
Yeah, it's
adult,
kind of
but she
like
was also had the heart of a child.
it's like seeing an old friend again, kind of like in
Oh,
a
sorry.
sense.
Oh, yeah. And even with like Tinkerbell and stuff, like that was really cool. Like really.
Yeah, I really like Return to Neverland overall,
Yeah.
and I'd say out of like most of like the sequels, which are better than the original, I'd say that Return to Neverland is kind of like on the same level as like Cinderella 3. Although Cinderella 3 is mostly there just because it's kind of a meme of a movie, I guess.
My gosh, that's such an amazing movie, though.
Yeah, it's a meme, but it's like a great meme about it. It's just kind of like,
it's so good.
yeah. I guess we could.
Yeah.
I guess we could talk a little bit about that. What are your overall thoughts on like the whole like Disney Hollow like initiative that happened like a couple of years ago?
I guess it was a couple of years ago now. Okay,
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew this, but I was recently discovering this, and I kind of figured it from the original, but a lot of people seem to see it, and I think you can read it this way, is like the Pixie Hollow sequels kind of portray Tinkerbell and others as characters with disabilities, or characters that don't fit the mold. And like I definitely can see that reading. Like I like if it, like, you know, she doesn't act in the same way. She thinks differently. She like, and so that was kind of interesting. It was almost kind of weird that they put Tinkerbell as, it was almost like they like, hey, we have this idea for a character, let's use the Peter Pan mythos to make this character.
Yeah,
so it's not that Tinkerbell is bad in these movies. She's just not Tinkerbell.
The thing is, it's just kind of like it slaps on like the Neverland kind of like branding onto it and everything. However, it never really plays into like the larger or kind of like theme of Neverland being like a place of childhood fun and wonder, like imagination. Like it does do a lot of interesting stuff with like creating the seasons and that kind of thing, but that's not really why Neverland is an interesting place. It's interesting because of what it represents, not what it does. It does. It represents in another context. It's two different contexts. Like the thing is, I can respect people for like liking the Pixie Hollow movies. It's just that I think that like Tinkerbell was the choice they went with for this type of movie. It's just like,
yeah, because like, let's be real, Tinkerbell's they portray Tinkerbell as having a temper in the movies, which fair, but Tinkerbell in the Peter Pan movies is actively malicious. Like, she's not nice.
Yeah.
She doesn't just have a temper. She is not nice. Like, if Terrence in the second movie, you know, with the, what is it, the blue moon thing where they have to get, like, the pixie dust? Like, if that were Tinkerbell from the movies, she would have straight up, like, the first time he messed up, she would have, like, smacked him over the head and kicked him out of her house. Like, she's not a nice person. So, does that mean Tinkerbell got worse when she met Peter Pan? Like,
the thing is, I almost think, like, the Pixie Hollow, is completely, like, separated to, like, Peter Pan due to how many, like, differences.
But then they bring in Captain Hook and stuff.
The thing is, I'm fine with these movies existing. It's just that they're existing in a space which they don't really inhabit well. Like, they have interesting ideas, and they do have, like, some good movies here and there. It's just that, as, like, Tinkerbell movies and Neverland movies, I think they don't really understand what they're adapting.
No. And, you know, honestly, even if they just, because all you really have to do, at least for the first, like, 3 or 4 movies, before they get into the whole Captain Hook and stuff like that, like, you literally could replace the title character and still have a great movie.
I think they're both good characters, it's just that they're two separate people, I think.
They are two separate characters.
Yeah.
They're like an alternate universe version.
Yeah.
That is basically what it is. It's an alternate universe.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've seen that before. We've seen that with Winnie the Pooh and stuff like that, but Winnie the Pooh, like, felt like Winnie the Pooh. Like, Winnie the Pooh has a very certain tone, and each characters have very certain tones. So you can still keep the characters and change the story, but with this one, you change the character. Speaking
of, like, alternate versions of the Peter Pan story, Jake and the Neverland Pirates. Remember that?
Oh my gosh, I love Jake.
When you think of Neverland and you think of like kids media for like TV, it's like Neverland is a very good fit for that because it's like it's always kind of like it works well for like a TV format. Kind of like they're always like doing like a Monster of the Week kind of like formula kind of thing. And with like Jake and the Neverland Pirates, it's always going to be like them finding their gold balloons and stuff.
It also plays in really well to the whole childish wonder because you get a lot of that in Jake and the Neverland Pirates, and like that's really fun, and that's really what Neverland is more about is like that childish wonder. Even when Peter Pan comes on, he still feels like Peter Pan because it's in the story of childish wonder.
Yeah, it does a better job at embodying Neverland than like the Tinkerbell movies do. And it's kind of good when most of your cast is kind of brand new and the only like two characters who've mostly appear in the show are like Captain Hook and Smee.
Yeah,
that's
and
kind
they're
of
more
good.
caricatures of themselves. Like they still feel like each other, but Hook is definitely a lot less. Like he's conniving, but you know, like
he's a Saturday morning cartoon kind of villain.
Which he's good at. Like definitely
he can play the character. He can do both. It's just that this show chooses to do one aspect of his character instead of multiple aspects.
And honestly, that's fine as long as you can tell it's him, like, and it's his character. Like that works. That works out well.
Yeah. Anyways, I guess now we can talk about like other like miscellaneous kind of like Peter Pan kind of. What? Hook is really a good movie. It's probably the best movie out of like Peter Pan and Return to Neverland that I've seen. I haven't seen like the live action 2003 movie, but I really like Hook. Yeah, I really like Hook though.
I argue at some points it's a little long, like just a little bit, but like it is a really, really fun movie.
Here, Peter Pan has just lost all of his childhood wonder and being an adult. So it's this movie. It's just him trying to like go back through like the motions of being like a kid again and being Peter Pan. Yeah. And I do think this is like the best version of the Lost Boys. I think.
Yeah, with reveal. Yeah, and I think it's different from Jane too, because Jane is a child.
Yeah.
Like, she never got to have a childhood, so she's relearning to have a childhood. Yeah. Peter can't connect to his children, so it's about connection and about rediscovering it. So not being a kid for the sake of being a kid, but for the sake of reconnecting with those who are still children.
Yeah, and you also have like Tinkerbell, who she has a romance towards like Peter and that kind of stuff. But she's not as murderous, I'd say.
Yeah, she's a lot less malicious. Like it's just almost like she doesn't really care, you know, like not care in the sense of like she cares a lot about Peter, but like she's like, oh, like I'll kiss him, like it's okay. It like what she's not concerned with, and it's a good Tinkerbell rendition. Like I can see her as Tinkerbell, but she's not the same kind of Tinkerbell as the Disney version, and like that's okay.
It's been a while since I've seen Hook because I don't really have access to the movie, but I think he does a really good job at like as almost like trying to let go of Peter in a sense. Like she's always trying to be peppy and that kind of stuff at like the beginning of the movie, but by the end of the movie she's just kind of like accepted that this is just who Peter is now and she has to move on. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a really I really appreciate the story that they decided to go for.
Yeah, it's a really good story, and I'd say it's like the best out of like both Peter Pan, like both of the Disney movies. I'd say like I still haven't seen like a lot of like the Peter Pan adaptations out there, but I'd say Hook is probably like the best one they have.